Well, welcome again to another edition of A World of Hurt. We are well into the series now. I believe this is number 10 in the series. And I would like to just kind of go back and recap a little bit of what we've been doing, just so you'll have a perspective if you're joining us for the first time, especially. We began in our first video talking about introducing you to the kinds of hurts that exist in this world. And then I broke down those hurts into three main categories. So Video 2, we talked about hurts that are caused by our own sinful behaviors. In Video 3, we talked about hurts that are caused by the injustices that we experience, those things that come into our life because of the sins of other people. In Video 4, we talked about the hurts that are caused by sacrificial service. So when we sign up for different kinds of sacrificial service, we're going to experience hurt. And then we shifted in video number 5 to introduce the principles that are involved in leveraging the hurts in the world. You see, this series is all about leveraging. We've been talking about Archimedes, who said, if you give me a place to stand and you give me a fulcrum, and you give me a lever that is long enough, I can move the world. And so we've been talking about the place to stand is in grace and truth. The fulcrum is our hurt. The lever is our faith. And God can push on that lever and He can move our world of hurt and turn it into something good. And then in video chapter 5, we begin to introduce these principles of involved in leveraging the hurts of the world. So we looked in video 6 at how discipline can train us for service, because one of the principles in leveraging hurt is to undergo discipline in our lives. In video 7, we talked about how love covers a multitude of sins, and this is also involved in leveraging the hurt. And then in video number 8, we talked about how trust wins against all odds. And then back in video 9, we introduced the positive outcomes from leveraging the hurts in the world. What are those outcomes? And so today we're going to consider the first of 3 positive outcomes if the hurts in our life are leveraged by God for our good. And so today we're going to talk about the outcome of personal victory. What is the outcome of personal victory? We all want to be winners. We all want to succeed. Nobody sets out to fail. We want personal victory in our lives, and then comes along a hurt. It may come early in our lives, it may come midway in our lives or later in our lives, but actually we have a lot of hurts. Some of them are small, some of them are great. And hurt comes along as if they are obstacles in our way. They're like we're running the race and somebody is throwing stuff on the track that we've got to kind of avoid and run around and deal with. And so we need to leverage those things in order to have personal victory. You know the old saying, you can't keep a good man down. You know, we love stories of victory and success. The Christmas movie It's a Wonderful Life with James Stewart is a prime example of the kinds of movies we love to watch over and over again. And who wouldn't root for the Karate Kid or for Rocky? Some will do almost anything, though, to win, even shady things. We are a very competitive society in business, in sports, in academics, and in social settings, and even in the church, and even in spiritual things. Coaches get fired for having a losing season. Athletes get sent back to the training camps if their averages are not good. And CEOs get canned if their bottom line is weak. And maybe that's it. We don't like weaknesses. We don't like losers. The symbols of failure are often the homeless, the drug addict, and the criminal behind bars. It has become popular in some schools not to give grades so as not to be able to tell the difference between the winners and the losers. In most kids' sports these days, everyone gets a prize simply because they participated. So how does this relate to the world of hurt? Well, all of us participate in this world of hurt. There is no sideline to sit on. We are all in the game. We are playing hurt. And when the four-wheel buggy comes out on the playing field and some 285-pound linebacker is taxied off the field, do you ever think that he's a loser? Now be honest. Do you see his injury as defeat? Do you want to scream from the nosebleed section of the stadium, "Suck it up, play ball"? We think to ourselves, well, he just couldn't handle it. He couldn't go the distance. Or even, we may think, I bet he's faking. We certainly do not want to reward fakes or lazy people or those who simply do stupid things. We recognize that E for effort is often warranted. So how should we define true victory for those who are hurting, those who are down, those who are suffering, no matter whether it is because of their own sin or the sin of others or simply because of their sacrificial service? When Paul uses the term more than conquerors in Romans chapter 8, there is something in me that says, yes, that is how I want to be remembered. But how does this become true for me? What feat do I have to perform on the battlefield of life to get the Purple Heart? The Bible gives a strange perspective as to what constitutes true victory in the midst of hurt. And we're going to explore that today. And I'm going to show you that no matter who you are and no matter what the hurts are in your life, you can have personal victory over the hurts. But we may have to redefine that a little bit. We may have to see how God looks at personal victory versus how we look at it. You see, remember, God's ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. And we have to learn to look at things through His eyes. So in Joel chapter 3 and verse 10, there is a phrase there that says, "Let the weak say, I am strong." You get that? Joel says, let the weak say, I am strong. Hillsong came out with a song many years ago that's become quite popular based on this scripture. And one of the refrains in it says, let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich. Let the blind say, I can see. It's what the Lord has done in me. Now that song defines the theme of what we're going to be talking about today, because we have to redefine what true victory is all about and where true victory comes from in our lives, even in the midst of the hurt, even when we're weak, even when we're poor, even when we're blind. What is it that the Lord has done in me? You know, Scripture is full of paradoxes. Paradoxes. Paradox is something that doesn't seem to be right, but it is right. It doesn't seem to be true, but it is true. It seems to go against the cultural norms. It goes against the normal way that we think about things. And so I want to give you a few paradoxes in Scripture and let you see how these relate to leveraging the hurts in our lives. The first one comes from James chapter 4 and verse 10, where James says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up. Now get the picture here. If you want to be lifted up, if you want to succeed, if you want to be elevated, you're going to have to get down low. You're going to have to be humbled. You're going to have to get down on your knees. If you want to ever win, in a sense, you got to be in a state of defeat. People who are on their knees often are showing that they've been defeated. You know the scenes that we see in the movies about someone, if you want to dominate them, what do? You put them down on their knees. You stand over them. You look down upon them because it's a sign of their weakness, that they're not strong. But James says that if you want to be lifted up, you better get down. You better be humbled. And that's exactly what happens in the midst of hurts. Hurts have a way of humbling us. But if we look at that as a negative, then we'll never understand the true victory that can be found in the midst of our hurts. The second paradox is found in 2 Corinthians 12 and verse 10. The context here is Paul, who has a, quote, thorn in the flesh. We're not told what that is, but it's some physical ailment, it seems, that he has to contend with. Or it could be some mental distress. We're not exactly sure what he was going through. But it was something he didn't want. It was suffering. It was something that he would rather do without. And so he prayed on 3 occasions, God, please take this thorn away from me. And God said on all 3 occasions, no, I'm not going to take the suffering away from you. And instead, God said, my power is made perfect in weakness. But in verse 10, the Lord says, he says, I want you to understand this, for when I am weak, that is when I am strong. Now that's a paradox. How can you be strong when you're weak? Well, it's the same principle as James 4:10. If you are only going to operate in your own power, then you will fail most of the time, because your power is really weakness. Because when you try to do things on your own and you try to do things yourself, you don't realize how weak you are for this life. You know, life is hard. The degree of difficulty in this life is off the charts. And if any one of you thinks that you can run the race and you can finish the course simply on your own power, you have underestimated the course. You don't understand how difficult the course is. You know, I admire the people who do the Ironman competitions, you know, the swimming and the biking and the running and all of that. It's incredible. And then there's even people that are more extreme than that, who run 100 miles at a time through deserts and the most extreme conditions. I mean, I've read about these people. I don't understand how they can do it. But even the most gifted of those athletes who do those things, they are no match for the hurts and the problems and the cares and the concerns and the anxieties of this world, because none of us have the ability to do that simply on our own. So when you are weak, when you realize how weak you are, you will know how much you must depend on God in order to be strong. And then in Romans 6 and verse 18, there's another paradox. He says, and this one is that we are set free from sin in order to become slaves to righteousness. Now that's righteousness. That sounds strange. If I'm going to be set free, I want to be free. I don't want to become a slave again. But he says, in essence, you're going to be a slave to something. You're either going to be a slave to sin or you're going to be a slave to righteousness. And so if you want to be set free from sin, which is a hard taskmaster, if you want to be set free from sin that causes so much of the hurt in this world, then you have to be willing to become a slave to righteousness. Some people don't want to do that. Some people do not want to give up their sin patterns that produce hurt in order to become slaves. They would rather just try to maintain their own freedom. But what they're doing is they're setting themselves up for failure over and over again. The hurts of the world can only be leveraged if we become a slave of righteousness. And then there's another paradox that we find in Philippians chapter 3, verses 7 and 8. Here, Paul talks about losing his life in order to gain it. Losing all those things that seemed to be so important to him, seemed to be advantages to him. You know, his birth, his credentials, his education, all of the things that seemed to be so wonderful and so useful to him. He said he had to realize that he needed to lose those things. He needed to give those things up. They needed to become so less important than anything else. And that when he did that, he gained the most important thing. He gained Jesus. And Jesus was able to do, again, exceedingly abundantly more with him than he was able to do with his own credentials, his own power, his own strength, his own pedigree. He began to understand that really giving those things up, not relying on those things, is really the better way to live. And so if you're going to overcome hurts, if you're going to allow God to leverage the hurts in your life, quit depending on your little short lever. You know, God has a very long lever to move your hurts, and he has the strength to push down on it. We've got a really short lever. We're trying to move a boulder with a 6-inch lever. That's not going to work. You've got to have a longer one. Jesus is the longer lever. And then the next one is found in John 12 and verse 24. It is again a paradox. Jesus here is talking about seed. He's really talking about his resurrection. But he says, if you sow a seed in the ground, in order for that seed to live, it's got to die. Because if it doesn't die, it will remain a single seed. But if it dies, it will produce a crop or seeds. It will produce fruit that has seed in it. It will produce the ability to do much more than if it was a single seed that lived but was not planted in the ground. So if you want to leverage the hurts in your world, simply you need to die. You need to die, because only in dying can you really learn to live. This is exactly what Jesus did on the cross. He died so that many could live. He died so that true life could be brought into the world through the resurrection from the dead. He defeated the enemy, death. And so what does hurt do to us? It destroys us. If we don't deal with it in the right way, we will be destroyed by the hurts in this world. And so, again, I encourage you, get a hold of these paradoxes. Understand them. That if you want to win, if you want to have victory, personal victory over the hurts in your life, then you need to die to yourself. Or you will become just simply a single seed. And then one more paradox, and it's probably the one I believe that summarizes the teaching and the understanding of Jesus better than any other statement that I can find in the New Testament. It's found in Matthew 10:39, and it's found in different versions in every one of the Gospels. But in Matthew 10:39 it says, "Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." It's very similar to the one before. But if you want to leverage the hurts in your life, then you have to lose your life in order to find it. True life is something to be found, is something to be sought. And we may think that the hurts in our life will prevent us from having true life. It doesn't. Those hurts are exactly what God can use to show you what true life is all about. And so, in the midst of the hurts, lose your life. Lose your life. Bury your life in Him, and you will find your life. You will be able to understand better what true living is. True living is not simply to be devoid of hurt. True living is about allowing God to work through our hurting. So, what do we learn from these paradoxes? Well, there's at least 4 things that we learn, and they're very similar, but I want to give them to you in 4 so you see the facets of them almost like a diamond. First of all, hurting reminds us of our dependence on God. A person who is hurting usually is looking for someone else to help them get through the hurt. And there's all kinds of ways we think about that. Sometimes when we're lonely, we need somebody in our lives to help us get us through the hurt. Sometimes when we are afraid, we call someone to come and help us get through the hurt. If we are sick, we call somebody to help us get through the hurt. Hurting reminds us of our dependence, but But the most important dependence we have in the hurt is dependence on God. So hurting reminds us of our dependence on God. It reveals to us our vulnerability. Secondly, it reminds us of our dependence on others. No man is an island. And again, when we're hurting, we not only should naturally turn to God, but we should naturally turn to others. Where there's burdens down here we cannot bear alone, and we need others in our lives. However, sometimes people deal with hurts by isolating themselves, by becoming an island, by sheltering themselves, by putting a bubble around themselves. But hurting reminds us we need others. We need people to help us to carry our loads, and we need to be carrying the loads of other people. Thirdly, hurting reminds us that we are not in control of everything. Hurting shows us that there are things that we just can't do anything about. We can't solve every problem that we have. We can't flip a switch and make it all right. We can't just take a pill and solve everything. We can't just simply go back to sleep and think that when we wake up the problem is going to be gone. There are many things in this life that are absolutely beyond our control. If you are in the path of a Category 5 hurricane, guess what? You can't change that. You may be able to move, you may be able to evacuate, you may be able to head for the hills, but you can't change the course of that hurricane. If it's heading dead at you, it will hit you. And there's many things like that in life. One of the most notable things is you cannot stop your own aging. You can't stop your death. You can't stop the inevitabilities of life, because those things are just simply par for the course. And so hurting reminds us we're not in control of everything. And then finally, number 4, hurting reminds us that this life is not all that there is. It's not all that there is. That there is another life to look forward to. That there is a time when we will enter into the joys of the Lord. That we will live in a state of being when we have set aside this fleshly body, and we will have an imperishable, an incorruptible body, a body that is not subject to pain and hurting and problems like this one is. We'll no longer be under the curse. So hurting reminds me that this is not all there is, that this world is not all there is, that there is another world to look forward to. Now, the hurt does not make you less or inferior to others. Now I want you to think about this. Sometimes, when we think about hurt and we talk about people going through their problems, we're trying to see if they're going to be victors or they're going to be victims. But hurt does not make you less than or inferior to others. In fact, it is not wise to compare yourself with others when it comes to hurt. And let me give you 3 examples of this that correspond to the 3 different kinds of hurts that we've been talking about. Sometimes, we might want to get into a spitting match with someone and say, well, who's the biggest sinner? In other words, sometimes what we do is we have a lot of hurts in our life, and we know that we brought them on ourselves. And so what we do is we try to say, well, I'm the biggest sinner. I'm a bigger sinner than you. That's why I have more hurts in my life. Well, that may be true, but I don't believe it's a wise thing for you to make that comparison, because hurts isn't about who's the biggest, who has done more wrong things in their life. Because there can be a person who has gone through a series of many sinful actions that has caused a lot of hurts in their life, that maybe those things might, in comparison with somebody else who only has one thing in their life, and they may be devastated from it. So let's get out of the business of comparing ourselves with each other when it comes to who is the biggest sinner. Secondly, who suffered the most injustice? Now, we've all suffered injustice. Some of it minor, some of it major. Some has very small consequences. Some may have great consequences. But I believe it's not a good idea to sit around and try to figure out who has suffered the most injustices, because, again, I think what that does is that we are implying that one person is a bigger victim than the other. And since I'm a bigger victim, then you should have more sympathy for me. You should have more empathy for me. You should have, and I should receive more help than you do because I've suffered more injustices. Well, again, I don't think that that's a wise way to look at the hurts that are in our lives. That it may be true. I'm not saying we ignore the realities, but simply to make that point, uh, it, it, it skirts the issue that is at hand. Let me make this one last point, and I'll show you what I mean. We should not ask the question, whose hurt is more because of the sacrifice that I made. You know, when we sit around and say, well, I've sacrificed a lot in my life. I've done for other people. I have put myself on the line to help others. Maybe I went to war, or I was a first responder, or, you know, how I sacrificed for my kids. And we go on and on about how much we sacrificed and the hurts that have come into our lives because of the sacrifice. Again, I don't think that's a wise thing to do, because it's not about who's the biggest sinner, who has suffered the greatest injustices, or who has hurt the most because of the sacrifices that they've made. I think it is this one point that is the leverage for personal victory in our lives, and that is, it doesn't matter whatever the hurt, however great the hurt is or small the hurt is, that only through your dependence and reliance upon God can you see God leverage the hurt in your life and maximize that hurt for good. So it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a 50-pound hurt or a 100-pound hurt. It is that God is the one who is going to leverage either one of them for your good, and you just simply turn them all over to God. Because it's really not about us leveraging our own hurt. It's allowing God to do it. Now, the victor, we do have a responsibility to participate in being victorious. And I want to give you 3 things that I believe are important in this victory that we share in with God, who is leveraging our hurts. Number 1 is don't quit. Don't quit. Keep on turning your hurts over to God. Keep on giving them to God. Keep on depending on God. Keep on practicing the paradoxes of Scripture. Don't quit. Keep on doing it. And secondly, don't look back. Don't look back on all of the hurdles and obstacles and things that you've overcome. Yeah, I understand that, telling the story can be important if we're telling the story about how God helped us over all those hurdles. But if we're just simply looking back to commiserate with people and say, oh, woe is me, how bad my life has been, how many problems I've had to endure, don't look back and dwell on the past. Paul says, forgetting the things that are behind, I am pressing forward to those things that are ahead. And then the third thing is allow God to leverage the hurt and turn it into strength. So keep on allowing God to press down upon that lever of faith that you have in your life in order to leverage the hurt, turn it into your strength. Keep on letting Him do His work in your life. So don't quit, don't look back, and don't stop letting God leverage the hurt in your life. The Bible is filled with so much on this subject. And as I was thumbing through the Bible in preparation for this, I came across a psalm that I thought would be good to close out with. And so is Psalm chapter 20. It's not one of the most well-known psalms in the Bible, but it is a psalm that I believe speaks to this issue of victory and is written by David. And it's a psalm that captures in a couple of places, I believe, the attitude that we are to have as victors in this world of hurt. So in Psalm 20, I want to read the psalm to you and just make a couple of points, and we're going to be done. He says, may the Lord answer you when you are in distress. There's your hurt. May the Lord answer you when you are in distress, and may the name of the God of Jacob protect you. May he send you help from the sanctuary and grant you support from Zion. May he remember all your sacrifices and accept your burnt offerings. May he give you the desire of your heart and make all your plans succeed. May we shout for joy over your victory and lift up our banners in the name of our God. May the Lord grant all your requests. Now this I know, the Lord gives victory to his anointed. He answers him from his heavenly sanctuary with the victorious power of his right hand. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. They are brought to their knees and fall, but we rise up and we stand firm. Lord, give victory to the King. Answer us when we call. Do you see the emphasis in this psalm? The emphasis is not on what I do to gain the victory. The emphasis is on what God does when I turn to him, I humble myself, and I cry out to him for the help that only he can give. His power is truly made perfect in our weaknesses. So if we want to be victorious, if we want the outcome of the hurt to be personal victory, then we're going to have to see this through God's eyes. I hope this has been helpful to you today. I hope this will help you to navigate the rocks and the problems and the hurts and fears and anxieties and distresses of life so that you can be more than conquerors through him who loved you. Until next time, let God take care of your hurts.